welcome to the channel. I'm back to give you my final picks for this Week 3 NFL DFS slate on DraftKings and FanDuel. Excited to get into it. We have some high totals on this slate. Should be a fun one, especially in tournaments. Going to be some shootouts for sure this weekend, and excited to get into it. Before we do, quick reminder, if you do enjoy the content at any point in this video, if you could please take a moment to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. That would be greatly appreciated. That way you don't miss any future content that I upload. Takes 2 seconds, it's free, and it does greatly help me. I'll be here all NFL DFS season long, breaking down these NFL DFS slates to help you guys become better NFL DFS players, help you guys win some money. That's the goal. We're going to get you in the green with these picks, and if you are getting very, very serious about NFL DFS, really want to become a profitable player, I would highly recommend my NFL DFS premium package. It's linked below in the description. You get access to all the same tools I use in building my own DFS lineup. They're really ramping it up over there. Top Stacks tool just got a complete redo, and as well as some projected ownership, etc. You get access to all that fun stuff, matchup charts. Check it out, link below in the description. There'll be a description of what is to offer when you get to the Patreon page. And with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to go position by position as always, starting with the QB position, which I think is a spot where you are going to want to pay up this week. We do have some other guys, of course, in this game on the other side of the ball, the QB side, that I guess you could go to from more of a salary relief aspect, because in order for the game to stay close, these guys are going to need to, step up. But some of these top guys are just not to be messed with. Kyler Murray, it all starts at the top, an $8,300 salary, taking on this Jacksonville Jaguars secondary, which has not been impressive at all, with a 29.5 implied total for his team. 51.5 over under this game on a 7.5 point spread in favor of this Arizona Cardinals team. And Kyler Murray has just been absolutely ridiculous from a fantasy aspect. Getting the job done through the air, getting the job done on the ground. He does it all. And this Arizona Cardinals offense really starting to look elite, really throwing the ball downfield a bunch, and he's got multiple weapons to go to now. Last time out, 400 yards on 36 attempts and 38.1 DraftKings points. I mean, that's great, obviously. That's going to make us very happy. And when you're looking at his snap counts, share, and all that stuff on my QB key stats tool, as far as his rush share, he's making up for 18.52% of the team rushes as well. So, I mean, the guy's getting it done in all facets. I'm not worried whatsoever about this Jacksonville secondary with the likes of Shaquille Griffin, CJ Henderson, Tyson Campbell. They really have not been good this year, and I think that the Cardinals are really in a good spot to be able to go off here. And Kyler Murray on DraftKings is definitely a spot that I will be looking to this week. So he's the first guy I'll be going to. Patrick Mahomes taking on the LA Chargers. 38.75 implied total for his team, a 55 over-under in this one. And a Chargers secondary that has some pretty good guys on an individual grade aspect, but when you're factoring in the fact that they're taking on the Chiefs this week and with this high total, I don't think it's going to be enough to slow down Mr. Mahomes in this offense. We know exactly where the ball is going as well, so he's going to have some great stacking options to go along with him here. And he comes in at 8,200 on DraftKings. He's definitely a guy that I'm going to be looking to. 36 and 31 attempts the first 2 weeks, 36, 28 DraftKings points. I mean, the only thing that's really a knock on him is we're going to talk about this a lot, but it's true in today's NFL and the DFS industry. Really need some QBs that are going to be able to get the job done on the ground. It's really just a matter of whether Mahomes can still get the job on the ground and keep up to date with some of these other QBs that we're going to be talking about. As far as his overall rushing performance and everything, he's accounting for about 14.63% of his team's rushes. And, I mean, that's decent. He's still a mobile quarterback. He can sling it down the field. We know what Patrick Mahomes is all about. He's got plenty of weapons to go to in Travis Kelce. And in such a high total game, I think he's a guy you definitely have to be looking to this week for sure. Lamar Jackson taking on a Detroit Lions team that has been absolutely terrible. They've suffered multiple injuries in the secondary, and they're expected to be one of the worst defenses in the league. And then you factor in that they're getting hurt. That's going to be a great recipe for success. The only question here is apparently he wasn't spotted at practice on Thursday due to an illness. And he's dealing with a non-COVID-19 stomach bug. So hopefully he'll be good to go. I have a feeling he will be. And when you're looking at his overall share on this offense and stuff, the guy's pretty much a running back. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous what Lamar Jackson's done, and he's completely transformed the QB position as far as what we think of it as being. Pulling up my QB key stats here, he's accounting for 37.33% of his team's rushes. I mean, pretty much 40% of the rushes that the Baltimore Orioles are running is via the legs of Lamar Jackson, which is ridiculous. And taking on a team that we know is terrible. They're terrible in the secondary. If there was ever time for him to have a good game through the air as far as passing, this would be it. And I think the upside is going to be immaculate this week. So I definitely do like Lamar Jackson. His 7.8 price tag on DraftKings is, as mentioned, with his rushing capabilities. I think he's a guy that you can definitely play naked alone with no wide receiver stack. I'm constantly saying if you're going to be playing a QB, be playing two of his wide receivers on the outside, or a wide receiver tight end, or a running back wide receiver, running back tight end, to get that correlation upside. And I do think that is the way to go. But if there was ever an exception to the rule, it would be Lamar Jackson. And you can definitely be making maybe an exception here. Russell Wilson taking on the Minnesota Vikings secondary that has been absolutely terrible. They have a 28.5 implied total here due the Seattle Seahawks. Russell Wilson overall has been slinging down the field as he always does. Deep ball attempts galore here on the season. 5.79 air yards per attempt. 11 deep ball attempts already on the season with 146.91 true passer rating on the season. That's top on the league right now. And he's 7,600 on DraftKings. I think that this is going to be a great spot for the Seattle Seahawks, taking on the likes and the secondary of these Minnesota Vikings that, as mentioned, is terrible, with the likes of Mackenzie Alexander, Patrick Peterson, Bashaud Breeland. It's just really not looking too promising for this Minnesota Vikings secondary. And the only thing that's going to keep them in this game, I have a feeling, is just being able to score points back, because the Seahawks are just going to absolutely go off here. I love Russell Wilson in this spot at the 7.6 price tag. He can get it done on the ground. He can get it done through the air. 31 attempts last time out, and I'd expect him to have a huge game here, accounting for, as far as the rush share in this offense, comparing him to the other QBs, he's accounting for 17.78% of his team's rushes. So still getting the job done on the ground enough to where that's going to increase his upside even more. And I think that the passing yardage and touchdown equity upside in this matchup is just going to be absolutely ridiculous. So Russell Wilson is a guy that I'll definitely be targeting this week. And lastly, Daniel Jones taking on the Atlanta Falcons, another team that secondary has been terrible. They've been a terrible defense last year. They're continuing to be this year. Not expected to be able to slow down much of anyone. Daniel Jones, another mobile quarterback that only at 5'8". I think you can get a nice friendly discount on him here. He gets this great matchup as mentioned. And then when you factor in the ability to run on the ground, he's also compiling a total of 31.25% of his team's rushes. So similar to Lamar Jackson almost. Daniel Jones able to get out and do it on the ground, able to do it through the air, all the above. And I don't think there's a much better spot that you could ask for here taking on this Atlanta Falcons team. So I definitely have interest in him. And then when I switch it over to the FanDuel salaries here, as far as who I'm looking to, very similar outlook. Kyler Murray, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson, Daniel Jones. It is the same outlook. I mean, it's the same guys I'm going to be looking to, even with their prices over on FanDuel. Those are the QBs that I'm really going to be honed in on this week. And let's go ahead and transition over to the running back position. And at the running back position, it all starts up top this week for me with Mr. Dalvin Cook taking on the Seattle Seahawks, who have been the very worst team against running backs so far on the season, giving up 42.7 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. Got absolutely torched last week by Mr. Derrick Henry. I think that we could maybe see it continue again. I shouldn't say maybe. See it continue again this week with Mr. Dalvin Cook. As mentioned, Derrick Henry, huge week last week, putting up 50.7 DraftKings points. Dalvin Cook, the only thing that's going to stop him is an injury. He wasn't a participant at Thursday's practice, which is a little bit concerning. Came out with a high ankle sprain, which has kept him off the practice field so far this week. And I don't know. We'll see if he returns to drills on Friday. If he's out, it's going to be Alexander Madison time. And if that's the case, then I'll definitely have some interest in him as well on this week. But right now, for the time being, we're going to assume that Dalvin Cook's able to go here. We get reports that he's a full go. And if that's the case, I'm going to absolutely love him. If that's not the case, we can definitely be taking a look to Madison as mentioned. So that'll be kind of my backup plan here. But Dalvin Cook's going to be a tremendous play if we get rumors that, if we get the confirmation that he is completely healthy and good to go this week. And he'll definitely be my top option here. 22 attempts last week, 20 attempts the week before. He's gotten targeted 7 and both 3 times. As far as his overall snap count data on the season, he's been out there for 73.6% of the team's snaps and 39.6% rush snap percentage. So getting a lot of runs when he's out there, and he's getting 85% of his team's overall rushing plays. So definitely liking Dalvin Cook this week. As far as on DraftKings, next guy I'm going to be going to is Austin Eckler, the LA Chargers, taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. In that game, we had mentioned the high over-under with the 55 over-under, a 24.25 implied total for his team. And Austin Eckler, a guy that traditionally has been an absolute target share beast on DraftKings with a PPR format. I think that Eckler is going to make for a great play at 7-2 this week. Last time out, getting targeted 9 times, 9 receptions, 54 yards and 9 attempts on the ground. I think that we're going to see his run game opportunities also ramp up here. Like looking at some of the key stats that I see on my sheet so far on the season for Austin Eckler, he's taking on a total of 50% as far as his team's overall rushes. He's only ran for 50% of the total touches, and I think that's going to ramp up. I think that's just kind of a temporary split here as far as how the numbers have graded out on the season so far for this offense. Eckler's workload in this offense has always been very high, and I definitely think he's in a great spot taking on this Chiefs run D this week, so I'm definitely going to like him. Saquon Barkley at 6,500 on DraftKings. I expect him to finally ramp up his usage here, and he's taking on an Atlanta Falcons team that we had just mentioned is absolutely terrible. This Falcons defense can't stop anyone through the air. They can't stop anyone on the ground. I think Saquon Barkley's in line for a very good opportunity to break out here on this Week 3 slate at 6,500. You know, if there's ever time for him to really go out there and show why he's one of the best running backs in the league still, I think this would be it. They've been working him in little by little here. Some of the games that they've been playing in, the script hasn't quite matched up for him to be able to just do the ground and pound, getting behind in games. If he's able to finally get ahead in this game with this Atlanta Falcons defense, which I think the Giants could do here, he could be in a great spot to really rack up the carries. 10 attempts in Week 1, 13 attempts in Week 2, and I think that we're going to see him really start to get back to the old Saquon Barkley here as far as volume and everything is concerned. I think this is the week that he really goes out there and explodes. So Saquon's definitely a guy that I'm going to be having a lot of interest in this week, taking on this poor Atlanta Falcons defense. Antonio Gibson taking on the Buffalo Bills, which on paper doesn't really look like the greatest matchup overall. Some of these guys, some people may not be quite looking to Antonio Gibson this week, thinking he's not exactly the best option. And don't get me wrong, I can understand the concern. But so far, as far as his workload and everything is concerned, he's got 67% of his team's overall rushes. He's been out there for a ton of plays as far as just being on the field overall. I'm not concerned about that whatsoever. He's out there for 62.7% of snaps so far in the season, but I expect that to ramp up even more. And he's involved in both the run game and the passing game. So as far as Mr. Antonio Gibson at 5,900, I think he's priced very reasonably. I think he could be in line for a big game here. And then one thing that stands out to me that people might not be even factoring in is currently, according to Pro Football Focus, the Washington football team does have a 77% run blocking advantage over this Buffalo Bills defensive line. So, you know, a little bit of conflicting numbers there as far as the Bills defense overall and their ability to slow down the run. I think that Antonio Gibson and this offensive line could really make a push here and give him some blocking to really have a big game. The only thing that would be a concern of mine really is the game script. They are 7.5-point dogs if they get behind in this game, and they might have to throw a little bit more often than we'd like. But as mentioned with Antonio Gibson's involvement in the pass game as well, I think this could be still a spot where if they get down, he could still go out there and have a pretty good game here. So Antonio Gibson's definitely a guy that's going to check all the boxes as far as price tag and interest on my list this week. And lastly, on DraftKings, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's only 4,800 this week, taking on this Chargers team. We talked about this game environment. We talked about Austin Eckler. We talked about the wide receivers on the outside and the QB combinations that could possibly be going on in this game. Clyde Edwards-Helaire has been out there for a ton of snaps. He's gone off to a very slow start here, but he's priced all the way down to 4,800 on DraftKings this week. I think that's way too cheap for the amount of time that this guy's been out there on the field. Don't get me wrong, he hasn't been producing, but I mean, looking at some of the key stats here on my sheet, as far as Clyde Edwards-Helaire goes, I mean, the guy has 33% of his team's rush snap percentages overall, 65% rush share, so he's rushing for 65% of the total offense's rushing attempts. And as mentioned, I mean, he's been out there on the field for a bunch of snaps. When looking at the overall snap percentage, he's been out there for 69% of his team's overall offensive snaps. Been on the field a bunch, just hasn't quite got the production going yet. I think this could be a spot that we really could in this high total game. And the fact of the matter is he's just way too cheap on DraftKings. Priced at 6.6, 6.7 first 2 weeks out. Now they priced him all the way down to 4.8. I think they may have overcompensated a little bit here. And I definitely do like Clyde Edwards-Helaire on DraftKings specifically. Switching over to the FanDuel side of things, as far as the running back position is concerned, very similar outlook over here as far as for the guys in Cook, Eckler, Gibson, and Barkley. But one guy that I do think that you should be prioritizing on FanDuel specifically would be Derrick Henry. Lots of touchdown equity on FanDuel. The touchdowns are very important. And we know Derrick Henry is just an absolute workload of a running back. Looking at some of his volume and stuff. Last week, of course, having a huge game overall on FanDuel, putting up 44.7 points. He had 35 rushing attempts. I think we continue to see him rush a bunch. And looking at how much he's been out there on the field, it's just absolutely ridiculous the amount of volume that this guy has. Derrick Henry accounting for 83.87% of his team's runs. He's getting 53.5 snaps per game. And as far as his overall time on the field, he's been out there for 70.4% of his team's overall snaps. So Derrick Henry checks all the boxes. He's workload running back. I think he gets a great matchup. Not exactly the greatest matchup taking on the Colts, but I think he's a guy that on FanDuel specifically with the touchdown equity and the limited options at the position. Some of the guys we talked about, some running backs getting some very tough matchups this week. I don't have an issue with you paying up for Derrick Henry on FanDuel. Maybe getting him lower owned than we typically would think. And his team does have a 26.75 implied total. They are 5.5-point favorites if you're able to get up in the game. The game script could definitely favor him as far as getting more runs. So I definitely like Derrick Henry. That's what I like for the running back position this week on both sites. Let's go ahead and transition over to the wide receiver position. Looking at the wide receiver position this week on DraftKings, it's all going to start at the top of Mr. Tyreek Hill taking on this LA Chargers team. We had mentioned the matchup. I like Patrick Mahomes, and of course Tyreek Hill is his main option here alongside with Travis Kelce that he's targeting. The target share on this offense is just absolutely ridiculous as far as who they go to. It's very predictable. We know the ball is going to Tyreek Hill. We know the ball is going to Travis Kelce, and we know he's going to be targeted early and often, both on short routes, downfield, all the above. 4 targets last week. I think that was a bit of an exception. In week 1, he saw 15 targets, and I think he gets back on the right track here in week 3 in this high total game. Looking at my key stat sheet over here, as far as his overall target share in the offense, he's seeing 30.6% of the overall target share in this offense out there for 93.6% of his team's snaps with 124 air yards per game. That is very good. That's definitely in the top portion of the league. And everything matches up for Tyreek Hill and this matchup. The only thing you can make an argument against him for is maybe some of these talented cornerbacks that the Chargers do have with guys like Asante Samuel Jr., Chris Harris Jr. But overall, I don't think that Tyreek Hill is going to have an issue. He's pretty much matchup proof at this point. He's proven it time and time again, and I definitely do like him in this high total game. So he's a guy that I'd be starting to if I'm paying up this week at the wide receiver position. Cooper Kupp, an absolute beast so far in the season. Second guy that I'm going to be looking to, the Rams taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Buccaneers secondary has been terrible so far in the season. Cooper Kupp's been out there for 97% of his team snaps, 27.5 implied total for his team. When you're looking at some of these stats that he's been putting up, just absolutely ridiculous. He's accounting for 38.2% of his team's overall target share percentage as far as the ball going his way. 19 contested targets. Stafford throwing it to him in traffic. It doesn't matter if he's open. He's still just gunning it, slinging it to him down the field. And Cooper Kupp has had some very big games, and I expect him to keep it going in this matchup, taking on this Tampa Bay team this week. That just does not scare me whatsoever with their secondary, with guys that are going to be in the back there like Jamal Dean, Carlton Davis, Ross Cockrell. None of them are going to be able to slow down Cooper Kupp, I don't think, and he's going to continue to see a bunch of targets. Him and Stafford have been showing some really big chemistry here early on in the season, and I'd look for him to keep it going here. Still not priced up enough to scare me off him. 10 targets in week 1, 11 targets in week 2, 26.8 DraftKings points in week 1, 39.8 points in week 2. Absolutely ridiculous, and I think he's going to keep it going in this matchup, taking on this Tampa Bay Buccaneers secondary, so I like him. Keenan Allen as a run back option taking on this Kansas City side with a 24.25 implied total for his team and a Kansas City secondary that really hasn't been the greatest. Kansas City more so known for the offensive side of the ball, that's for sure. And when you're looking at the overall volume that Keenan Allen's been getting, 13 targets in week 1, 8 targets in week 2. Guy's an absolute target share beast. Pulling up the key stats as far as his overall target share. 24.4% targets, 24.4% of the overall target share in this offense. He has 119.5 air yards per game, 16 yards per reception. Definitely showing a lot of upside capability here. And as mentioned in this high total game, another guy that I will definitely be taking a look to this week. And if I need some salary relief, the next guy that I'll be looking to is going to be Marvin Jones at 4,900. Taking on this Arizona Cardinals team, we had mentioned the interest in Mr. Kyler Murray in the Arizona offense. You're going to need a run back option, and Marvin Jones Jr. is that guy if you're building out your lineups, I think, without a doubt. His overall share in this offense has been very impressive. He continues to be underpriced, in my opinion, at 4,900. He's seen 9 targets, 11 targets the first 2 weeks, 18.7 and 17.5 DraftKings points. He's gotten in the end zone both games, and the target share and everything is just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the guy's been out there for 89% of his team's snaps. He's accounting for 24.4% of the overall target share, 122 air yards per game. Guy's getting it done in every single aspect of the game. And then when you're factoring in the cornerbacks that he's going to be taking on in Arizona, they're not going to be enough to scare me off him either, because I think he can definitely beat the secondary. Not worried about it at all. The secondary really not grading out well with guys like Byron Murphy Jr., Marco Wilson, Robert Alford, all the above. Not enough to scare me whatsoever as far as not targeting Marvin Jones. And as mentioned, if you're going to be playing the Arizona side, I think he is a great run back option. So that's really the first 4 guys I'll be looking to. And the last guy I think that is underpriced is going to be Mr. KJ Osborne, taking on the Seattle Seahawks secondary in that game that has a high total. I talked about having interest in the Seattle Seahawks. I think KJ Osborne at 3,500 is just underpriced, quite frankly. He's been out there for 71.5% of his team snap. He's been getting targeted a decent amount on the season. Pulling up the overall target share for that, 19.5% of his team's targets are going his way. And overall, the guy has pretty good numbers. I mean, 13.91 yards per reception, 11.1 yards per target. He's being targeted downfield. He's being targeted quite often. And he's been out there for quite a few snaps. And with so much attention going to Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson, I think that Osborne could definitely be a guy that maybe flies a little bit under the radar and a guy that's pretty underpriced. I mean, 14.6 DK points in week 1, 20.1 DK points in week 2. The guy's getting it done. And I definitely think that you should be having some interest in KJ Osborne this week from a salary relief aspect on DraftKings. So those are the wide receivers I'd be looking to on DraftKings. As mentioned, over on FanDuel this week, I do have a lot of similar interests. Tyreek Hill, Keenan Allen, Cooper Kupp, Marvin Jones Jr., Tyler Lockett would be the guy that we didn't discuss over on DK. I talked about liking this Seattle passing attack. Really, it's just a matter of price tag on the 2 sites at 8K on FanDuel with some of their more lenient pricing. I think he might be a little bit easier to get in some of your lineups, but the guy's been absolutely awesome. Getting targeted early and often. He's been out there for 88.1% of his team's overall targets. 30.8% of the team's targets are going his way. 17.37 yards per target. Being targeted downfield a bunch. I mean, I think DK Metcalf's kind of the guy that's thought of as the downfield burner. But so far, it really hasn't been him. And I think that people are being a little bit stubborn as far as, just acknowledging the fact that Lockett's been going down the field. He's been the one being targeted on these deep balls. I think he's going to continue to be 5 targets, 11 targets, 178 receiving yards in last week, 100 yards the week before. And Tyler Lockett is definitely a guy that I will be looking to on FanDuel this week and definitely part of that Seattle Seahawks passing offense that I am having a lot of interest in. So with that being said, let's go ahead and go over to the tight end position. And at the tight end position on DraftKings, no surprise, at the top, it's going to all start with Mr. Travis Kelce, an 85% snap share overall out there. Pretty much a wide receiver at this point. We know what Travis Kelce is capable of. He's an absolute beast. He's priced up and for good reason because of the stuff that he can do out there. 7 targets, 8 targets so far on this season. He's put up 25.6 and 26.9 DraftKings points. Absolutely ridiculous. Scoring 2 TDs in week 1, 1 TD in week 2. And I mean, if there was ever a time for this guy to really show his skills, this would be it. And then when you're factoring in the matchup overall, taking on this Chargers team, has a great matchup overall. He's a 63% advantage as far as taking on Mr. Kaiser White, who's going to be the linebacker, most likely lining up across from him for most of these snaps. And overall, as far as the snap count data and all of the stuff that Travis Kelce has been performing and putting on so far, he's been out there for 99 snaps, 49.5 snaps per game, 85.3% of his team snaps. He's on the field with a 15% target snap percentage overall and a 23.81% target share in this offense. So, 23% of the targets are going this way. We know he's going to get targeted in the red zone. We know he's getting targeted downfield. And if there's a guy that you're paying up for at the tight end position, it is going to be Mr. Travis Kelce. It goes without saying. TJ Hockenson, next on the list, taking on the Baltimore Ravens, who have been the worst against the tight end position on the season so far. Now, of course, context is always important. They have had 2 very tough matchups. Darren Waller and Travis Kelce are the ones taking them on. But it's not as if TJ Hockenson is a slouch, and they might have some more issues with the tight end position this week because this guy has been an absolute beast so far. 11 targets in week 1, 9 targets in week 2, 25.7 and 20.6 DraftKings points. I think he can look to keep it going this week. As far as his overall target share in this offense, he's 20.88% targets are going his way. And he's out there for 87.9% of his team's overall snaps. So Hockenson, another guy, he's been looking great as far as his overall targets downfield. He has 78.5 air yards per game. That's way up there in the league, second to Mr. Darren Waller. So, everything matches up as far as TJ Hockenson is concerned. I'm definitely going to have a lot of interest in him this week, and he's the second guy to be looking to. Mark Andrews, Baltimore taking on this terrible Detroit secondary that we were talking about with Lamar Jackson. You could definitely be stacking him up with Mark Andrews this week, who's going to come into this matchup with a great matchup, but I think at a very reasonable price at $5K on DraftKings. 5 targets in both weeks so far. Hasn't managed to find the end zone. This could be the first game that he does, and definitely a spot that I am liking. So I'm going to have some interest in Mark Andrews for sure. I think that he could really ramp things up here. He has a 19.6% target share percentage overall in this offense. 77.03% as far as the total snaps. He's on the field there for a lot, and he's been targeted 10 times to contested targets. Lamar Jackson is not afraid to throw it to him in traffic as well. So Mark Andrews, another guy that's definitely making sense to me. Noah Fant taking on this New York Jets squad with a 26 implied total for his team. Definitely a guy that's piquing my interest with a $4,800 price tag as well. The only thing is he is questionable as far as the latest update on that. He was a limited participant Thursday. So far, 8 targets, 6 targets the first 2 weeks. He was able to get in the end zone last week, 13.3 DK points, getting targeted plenty. And I definitely think this is a spot that he can continue to keep it going. 39 air yards per game, 20.28 target share percentage in this offense, getting over 20% of the team's targets. So that you always like to see that. Noah Fant, a guy that I will definitely be targeting in my lineups. And lastly, Gerald Everett on DraftKings I think is way too cheap this week. He's only $3K. He has 75.9% snap share percentage. He's been out there for plenty of snaps. 28.5 team total for his side. And I mentioned I'd like Russell Wilson. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not as if he's a guy that's always tied into the game plan to the max. For the most part, this offense really does go through Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. He's had 2 targets in both of the first 2 weeks. But if there was ever a game and game environment that I'd like to target him at a price tag, this would be it. I think he's just way too cheap. He's going to be out there for the snaps, not getting the most amount of targets. All it's going to take is a few 20-yard passes down the field, a score on the touchdown. Not even that at this 3K price tag, but for tournament's sake, the upside is tremendous at this 3K price tag, and I definitely do have some interest in him this week on DK. And then as far as my FanDuel tight ends this week, really about the same core. The one guy I would say that I have a lot of interest in that I didn't mention in the other game, on DraftKings due to the value of Gerald Everett would be Rob Gronkowski. This guy's been an absolute beast on the season so far. We know the chemistry that him and Tom Brady have. He's seen 5 and 8 targets, been able to score 2 touchdowns in both games, 29 and 19.9 DraftKings points. I mean, the fact that he's being targeted this often in the red zone is great. He's out there for 82.92% of his team's overall snaps. He's got a 16.04 target share on this offense. Everything matching up, and then when you're looking at his overall matchup this week, taking on the likes of Kenny Young and this LA linebacking core, I think it's going to be a great spot for Mr. Rob Gronkowski. So he's definitely another guy that I'd be looking to on this slate this week. And that's my overall breakdown. Those are my top plays at each position on each site. So be getting them in your lineup for sure. And if you are interested in some further content from me, I do offer those premium packages linked below in the description. KJK DFS packages, check them out. I think they're going to help you a lot with building your lineups up to lock. There's a solid top 5 picks for you at each position, but obviously there's going to be a lot more to it. Top stacks tool, all of the above offered over there on Patreon, so go ahead and check it out. And that's all, guys. Wish you the best of luck in this week 3 slate. Going to be a crazy one. Lots of high-scoring games. Hopefully, you're able to cash in tournaments. Remember to correlate your lineups. QBs with 2 pass-catching guys. Lock in on those running backs that I discussed. And work your way into the green and win some money. Wish you all the best of luck in week 3, and we will see you in the next one.